My name's Robert Oak. I started at Rosie O'Grady's in 1974. I worked with Bill Allred out at Disney, and he came to me and he said, Rob, they're looking for some singing, dancing waiters down at this bar, and it's going to be really quite unique. Dancing waiters and can-can girls and great band. So I went down. The first time I saw it, we were hanging curtains on where the speakers are in Rosie's, and there was craftsmen all over the place. So there wasn't a waiter position, but I started on the food line. And the fellow that was the manager, he said, Rob, he said, on one number, jump up on the bar. You're a dancer, right? I said, well, yeah, start dancing. I said, oh, well, okay. So I jumped up on the bar. I hadn't rehearsed anything, so I'm doing all this stuff. And from that point on, I was able to work and dance in different rooms, singing and dancing, but there's so many people that have gratitude for what Bob Snow did, and what he did to Orlando was absolutely incredible. A guy with that kind of vision. He brought people together. No matter what your job was, from A to Z, you were all part of a family, and you always felt that way. He literally put Orlando on the map. Ran into Michael Jackson 3 different times, and I'm coming up to this chair. Who jumps out from behind? Michael Jackson. And he's got a camera, and he takes a picture of me. Well, I met so many people, that friendships that will last the rest of our lives because of Bob. Bob, we miss you dearly. We really do. You were one in a million. God bless you.
All right, all right, all right.
Oh my gosh, this is wonderful, man. You were there the first night and you were there the last night. It shaped my life. It was just the best time of my life. So I started at Rosie's in 1977. I mean, the beginning, it was like January, it was cold, and was a doorman, and they ran out of people to promote, and the place was getting bigger, so they made me the relief manager. And one night I was standing at the front door. There was a big coffee pot there, and everybody bought their ticket and came in and came out, and Mr. Snow walked up, and he said, Porter, there's a light out behind the eternal flame. Well, there were 1,400 light bulbs in Apple Annie's, because Mr. Milano used to try to catch me not recognizing the light bulb was out. And Bob Snow walks up and he goes, there's a light bulb out over there behind the eternal flame. Yes, sir, I'll take care of it. And I go behind the eternal flame. I don't see this light bulb, and way back behind the stage, there's a light bulb out. And I thought he was Clark Kent with X-ray eyes for a minute. He got it. He saw that. That was pretty amazing. And Bob came out of Lily Marlene's, the restaurant. And he said, Porter, that rail over there's come loose. Yes, sir, I'll take care of it. What board? I'm looking all over I didn't see a board. And again, at the very top of the doorway, all that woodwork that was in Rosie O'Grady's, a little bitty board had just popped up. So I put the work order in, and one day Mr. Milano was leaving, and I said, Mr. Milano, can I ask you a question? He said, sure. I said, how in the world did Mr. Snow see a light bulb out that the public can't see? And how did he know that little bitty piece of trim? How did he know those things? He said, hell, he built the place. He knows where everything is. I got it. One little quick story from Mr. Milano. I went up to him after about the 3rd Street party, and I said, Mr. Milano, I said, why don't you ever say thank you? What an answer. He said, I thank you every 2 weeks. And I got it. So those are 2 lessons. Milano used to come by and Snow would laugh, and Milano would say, if you ain't having a good time, you're not working hard enough. I'm standing there leaned up against the table where the coffee machine is, and here came somebody with a stack of them in their popcorn box. And I said, Snow's standing right beside me. And I said, excuse me, love for you to have those. We sell them in the gift shop. They're like $1 a piece or something. You can have them. I said, well, thank you, I appreciate it. He said, what's your name? Porter Freeman. And he said, you like what? He said, you like working here? I said, yes. And Snow is standing right beside me. You got to picture this. He said, well, good, because you're going to be gone tomorrow. I said, well, I hope not, sir. He said, I'm a personal friend of Bob Snow's. And I said, he's a wonderful man. Snow's standing right here. And this guy goes, well, enjoy your last night. I said, yes, sir, thank you. And he left, and Snow kind of leaned over. He said, does that happen often? I said, about once an hour. Everybody knew Snow and was a buddy of his. Just a lifetime of experience that I wouldn't have gotten being a doorman in the ABC.
Mason Street. Well, that's the street where all the young folks meet. Way down in New Orleans, where the dreams. You'll never know how nice it seems. All you struggling needs to be. Yes, sir, where welcome's free. Live to me, but I can't lose my Mason Street blues.
That's impossible.
I was only 17 years old when I went and applied for a job at Rosie O'Grady's, and Porter Freeman hired me. He said, "Can you sell t-shirts?" I said, "Sure I can." Well, I started working at the gift shop, and one of my jobs was answering the phone. And one day I answered the phone, and it was Bob Snow. And he said, "Can you get me a manager?" Sure. I put him on hold and cut him off. He calls back. He said, "This is Bob Snow. Can you give me a manager?" I said, "Sure, hold on." Cut him off again. And then he calls again. "Can you get a manager?" I said, "Sure, hold on." Cut him off again. He calls back. He goes, "What is your name?" I said, "Sherry." He goes, "This is my last dime." The next day or so he came in and he was like, "So you're Sherry, huh?" I just was happy he didn't fire me.
Okay, it all started when I opened Disney in 1971 as the original Alice in Wonderland. And that's how I met Rob Oak, who became my dance partner down at Rosie's. July of 1974, when Rosie O'Grady's opened, I went down to Church Street, down to Rosie O'Grady's, and said, "I can do the Charleston." "Well, we don't need a waitress right now." I said, "That's okay, I just want to dance." I had to call my parents and say, "Hey, I got a job dancing on the bar down at Rosie O'Grady's. Well, what should we wear? And I said, a raincoat, because you're going to get beer spilled all over you. And my dad is a real jazz fanatic, and he said, these guys are the real deal. If it wasn't for Mr. Snow, none of that would have happened. It was my dream and my heart's desire to dance.
1, 2, 1, 2, I feel such a thrill. My feet, they won't keep still when they swing that music. Music like that, in a trance. Oh, you can't blame me, no, one to dance. Now, what I understand, it must feel folks who can play with a band when they swing that music. I'm as happy as can be when they swing that music for me. Swing it.
Hi, my name's Hubie Garacki, and worked for Bob 84 to 89 when he sold it. When followed him out to Las Vegas, and then came back to Orlando in '92. But the story I always remember is Halloween night. Jim, myself, and 3 other managers went up to the second floor of Rosie's, and we decided we were going to be Can-Can girls that night. Real life Can-Can girls that had the uniform on and danced on top of the bar.
Fishnet hose.
Yeah. And we slid down, and I can still remember Bill Allred's face when we came down the pole, and he looks at us like, holy crap, what's going to happen
Didn't miss
next?
a beat though, did he?
No, he didn't miss a beat. Professional like he was.
Yeah.
We got on top of the bar, and we did the Can-Can in front of 650 of our closest friends. And it was very enjoyable. It was lots of fun.
Yeah. Who, John Rodriguez and who else?
John Rodriguez.
Was
Was it Bill? Mayonnaise?
yeah, Bill Munsey.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some. Was it? No, Haven didn't.
No, Haven didn't.
He'd never be caught in fish hose.
No. But no, it was a blast.
And it's
that
a good
night.
thing that Bob wasn't working or wasn't on property that night. That's for sure, because we would have probably all been fired.
Well, that's a possibility, but
Yeah.
it was a hilarious night, and everyone had a good time. And
Yeah.
the customers
Sure did.
thought we were the true act until they saw the second show and saw the real act.
We had
So-
these bright wigs, like Halloween wigs.
Yeah.
And of course, Hubie's was bright orange.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what color I was wearing, but yeah, that was a fun time.
I don't think those uniforms got used a whole lot after that night. They were stretched out.
A story I remember about Bob, though, too, is in the orchid garden in Francois. You remember how many light bulbs were in that room? Literally thousands of them, thousands. And Bob, he was always attention to detail. He spotted everything, and it always. After Christmas Vacation came out, it always reminded me of Clark's father-in-law when he said, Clark, some of the lights aren't twinkling, because Bob said all he had to do was just point up, and I knew immediately what it was. So we had to keep every one of those light bulbs going, and like
Yeah.
I said, there were thousands of them. Yeah.
There was one thing I remember asking Bob. We were explaining something, and he was explaining it to me, and I said, "Well, that's just common sense, Bob." And he looked at me and he goes, "Who said common sense was so common?"
Yeah, I remember that.
And it really stuck with me from almost 40 years now. I think of that, and it's so true out there.
Yeah.
So
Just his he was really a genius, when you think about what he did,
Yeah.
what he envisioned, and what he created. And we all have so much to be thankful for. Francois would never have met you,
yeah,
hired you, even though you were underage. But yeah, I just the number of, and Linda, this is for you too. The number of couples that ended up marrying, I met my wife Elizabeth there, but I remember that interview very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just it really has touched my life, all of our lives, and I would never have met this handsome guy. That's for sure too.
darn near blind, aren't you?
Yeah.
My name is Lorelei Anderson, and I only was part of Church Street for a very, very short time. But that's mostly due to Lee Floyd. I started working with the banjo band, but and I unfortunately don't have any very personal stories about Bob, but I did get to meet him a few times. But I always felt a kindred spirit with him because my father was a pilot, and so I kind of grew up in a small airplane. And so the Sky Riders and everything. And I actually met Joe and had conversations with Joe many more times than Bob, but just always felt at home at Church Street Station. And so I just met Rob Oak outside, and he said that I should come in and tell a funny story. I was the Red Hot Mama, and it was the World Cup in '94. And it was the craziest bunch of people I had ever seen in my life. And it was crazy. And they were literally jumping off the second level and jumping onto the chandeliers and swinging from the chandeliers. And I remember standing on the stage and just going, oh my goodness. And the chandeliers held them, and they were just swinging, and the chandeliers were just going like this, and they'd just jump off. I've had some of my best years at Church Street Station, and just enjoyed it and learned so very much from everybody there. So thank you for this opportunity.
My name is Pat Phillips, and I guess I would call myself really as a friend of Bob and Linda's. And when I first met Bob, I had an office right downtown Orlando on Orange Avenue. When Orlando was dying, it was dead, and then this great thing, Church Street Station, was coming to town. And Bob, which was in the mid 70s, and as the Church Street Station was developed, it was kind of one of the neatest things that came to the downtown area, especially when he started having nickel beer night. And I mean, for happy hour, everybody on Orange Avenue, every office would empty out at 5 o'clock, and everybody would be at Church Street Station, the whole community. And it was almost a celebration of the community, because it was a revitalization of the downtown Orlando area, which at that time and that point was almost dead. And I guess personal reason I really got to know Bob early on, I had a cousin. His name was Scott Phillips, first cousin. I taught Scott to fly, but Scott went to work for Rosie O'Grady's. This is my first cousin, and he was down here at the Rosie O'Grady's Flying Circus here at Orlando Executive Airport, right close to where we are now. Got started. My cousin was, I guess, one of Bob's first employees in the balloon. They were flying hot air balloons at that time, starting off, and my cousin Scott was running the hot air balloons, but Bob took an active interest in the flying circus, because Bob being a pilot, and I was also involved in aviation, and then Bob developed with the hot air balloons, the advertising, and then he had the skywriting, and then the banner towing, and then his banner towers, he started out with the Stearman, which Bob and Ode, when he had it back in Pensacola, brought it here to Orlando, and that was his first banner towing airplane and his first Skywriter. And I had the privilege of flying with the airplane I didn't fly as a pilot, but more as an observer, towing banners, and that was a great way to see Central Florida. And then Bob ultimately bought and purchased Staggerwing Beechcraft, which he was well known for, and there's a picture of it right on the wall behind me. And that looks exactly, that could be a picture of Bob's Staggerwing Beach, same color, same model. But Bob flew all over the country with Joe Kittinger, who later on was in charge and running in the operation of the Flying Circus. So, going back to the earlier days of downtown, Church Street Station became a success, and then when Bob got when it came time to pay his mortgage off, Bob did things right. You know Bob, he's the master showman. Bob got the Church Street Band together, and the Church Street Banner, and Bob walked all the way down Church Street, down to Orange Avenue, and walked into the bank's office and handed the bank president the check to pay off his mortgage. And that was really, among the community, it was really uplifting. It was really motivating for those in the community, and especially those in the downtown community, Orlando. Downtown was back alive. It was up and going, and it was all because of Bob Snow. And my more recent memory of Bob decided to buy a Model A Sport. As we know, that he had some exotic cars when he had Church Street Trace Station, and had the cars in parades, and I got involved in some older antique cars like Model A's and Model T Fords. And so Bob called me one day. He wanted to come learn to drive the Model A Ford, so he came over. And Bob, he was an early morning guy. I remember he knocking on our door at our house. This was a couple of years, just as recently as a couple of years ago, that he'd come to learn to drive my Model A Ford, which I offered him. And this was like, it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. sun was just up, so we went out and taught Bob to drive a Model A, and then bought a Model A, which was he really loved his Model A, and he got the first day he got it, he came to my office again. This was probably a year and a half ago, and we spent all day driving this Model A Ford around Orlando, and Bob really mastered the car and driving the car, and it was just kind of a neat experience to just think of Bob and how he enjoyed going around all day long, riding around town in his Model A Ford.
Well, my name's Steve Wood. I was a Warbird pilot over in Tampa, and my boss met Snow at some air show or something. Anyway, they got to talking, and my boss was out of money, and so he decided he'd loan me out to Bob Snow. And I was at my folks' house, and the phone rang one night, or about 5:30. And my dad answered the phone, said 2 words, and hung up. And I go, "Who was that?" He said, "Some guy from Orlando wanted to talk to you." And then he called, and it was Bob Snow. And met Bob, and we went out to the airport and checked the airplane over, got it out, got it ready. We got in, he got in the back, because that's where you fly a Stearman from, and I got in the front. And we went up and we flew around for about an hour. I know we did at least 1 or 2 spins, which most people won't do, and a few other things. And I was surprised how slow a Stearman spun. Boy, it was slow motion compared to some things. But anyway, so then we were coming back to the airport. He says, "Well, you land." So I lucked out. I got a perfect landing. He goes, "Hooray!" So I figured I was in, you know. So we worked out a deal, and I ended up making an apartment in the hangar. Yeah, so life was good. And since you want a funny story, so we're going train. So Bob calls up and he says, "Hey, we're doing this wine tasting on this train, and it's 2 days. The first day they're going to go over by Tampa and then turn around and come back. And the second day they're going to go up to Palatka and turn around and come back." So the first day we went down to Sturtree Station. First thing in the morning, the train's there. It's a big steam train. I mean, big steam locomotive and about half a dozen cars. And Bob's there getting things organized and stuff, you know. So that was pretty neat. So what he wants us to do is buzz the train when it's coming back from Tampa. So this sounds like a lot of fun. So, and we had smoke on 3 of the airplanes. So we were getting ready to go, and Rick, who's going to be on in a little bit, his airplane was broke. Well, we wanted it because it had smoke. So the magneto drive had sprung a leak. So we frantically fixed that for about an hour, got everything rolled out, got ready, took off. There were, I think, 4 of us. And what we had to plan was how to not do it over towns. So we had to look at the charts and figure out places where there were, because you're not allowed to be below 500 feet near a building, technically. So we found a couple of places that looked like they'd work. So we flew out there and we're waiting. You can see the train coming, you know, the smoke's coming out and the steam's blowing. So we roll in on the train what we do is there'd be trees and forest sections and there'd be open fields. So there was no sense doing it over the trees because they can't see us coming. But over the fields, they can see our eyeballs, you know. I know a couple of guys went by below the trees beside me. I stayed above the trees trying to set a good example. But it was a blast, and we'd hit them with the smoke, and the engineers are waving, you know, and we got them about 3 or 4 times on the way back from Tampa, you know, and that was just a blast. So, oh boy, so next day we're gonna do Palatka trip, you know. So we actually got, one of the guys had a home-built airplane and he wanted to go, and I go, well, okay, he didn't have smoke, but he looks like a Star Wars airplane, you know. So off we went the second day, and it was more fun than the first day. I mean, there were sections of solid trees and in wide open fields, and we'd be right there, you know, with the smoke on, and they're blowing the whistle, you know, and it was just a blast. And then we all formed up, came back and landed, and we had no problems at all. It was just great, and it's the most fun thing we ever did, all of us. We just had a blast.
Hi, my name is Rick Thompson, and I was with Church Street Station for over 20 years, and I had various jobs throughout the complex during that time. The first time I ever met Bob Snow was at the Kissimmee Airport. I had a Ryan PT-22 open cockpit World War II trainer in one of the city hangars down there, and parked out in front in the grass was an AT-6 that was all painted up. It said Rosie O'Grady's Flying Circus, Skyrider on the side of it. And then in the hangar was a Stearman. One day the guy showed up. It was Bob Snow, and I didn't know who Bob Snow was. So he was trying to get this banner untangled and set up out front so that he could pull a banner around Orlando. So I helped him because I was there, and we talked and stuff, and he says, I'm building a bar downtown, and it's called Rosie O'Grady's. He invited me down, and I started doing paintings for him. He says, just keep painting, just keep painting. So he got me on board doing some of that kind of stuff, and he goes, we're going to be developing across the street. He says, have you got a sketchboard? I said, yeah. He says, why don't you follow along? He says, I need some architectural type drawings. And I said, okay. So he started arm waving, and I started sketching. And the first thing we did was the Cheyenne. And we went in there, and it was a Western apparel shop, a 2-story old building, looked like it was built in the 20s maybe. And he says, we're gonna cut this roof out, and then we're going to go on back, and we're going to build another layer behind and up on top of that. He says, okay, so I would draw, and you go, yeah, no. And it was interesting because I would make changes as we would go, and then come back and do a final pencil drawing, a color pencil drawing. And he used that to take to the architects to kind of give a visualization as to what it was that he had in his mind. Whenever we would have an air show party, a pilot party after an air show, and it was at Church Street Station, it was always first class. I think of all the activities of my life that I've been able to do, being associated with Church Street Station and Bob Snow was an experience of a lifetime. It was an era.
All right, we're going to dedicate this last song to Mr. Bob Snow, who we all knew and loved, and those of you who didn't know him, I'm sorry about that, but this whole evening is because, and we're together because of this man, this great man, and we're going to do a jazz version of Sweet Rosie O'Grady.
I'll direct to that. 1, 2.
ready to have a good time, let me hear you say yeah. Where's Michael Payne?
We need some waiters to sing the waiters welcome song. We need some managers who were formerly waiters to sing the waiters welcome. Everybody to Rosie
It won't be long before you see why. We're ready to rock the flag and rock the flag. Rehearsal one more time.
God bless you all, and God bless Bob Snow.
Yes, I bless you, Mr. Snow. Thank you, Bob, for the best days of our lives. It will never happen again.